Thank you very much, Eric. And I really appreciate everybody staying. This is great to see so many people in the room. I know it's the last panel of the day, so we're going to try to really go for it and answer as many questions as we possibly can. But the first thing I wanted to sort of broach with you all is the title of our presentation, which is AI Will Really Replace Us. So normally I would say we should all take a breath and go, okay, that's probably not true. However, I just don't know if anybody had a chance to catch the news last night. Dario Amodei was on. He was the one of the vice presidents over Open Chat AI, working with our friend Sam Altman. And he actually declared last night that over the next 1 to 5 years, 50% of all the entry-level jobs in the U.S. will be done by AI. So, getting started now. All right, so I would say, though, that we have to really consider that with every new technology, there's going to be a fear of the unknown, and AI is going to be no different. So as the technology evolves, so does the need for us to get a comfort with it and to get our understanding and our arms wrapped around it. So a glimpse of this that we've seen actually is with the recent NAIC and other regulatory entities actually doing surveys which have really demystified and to a degree some of the functions that we've seen come out of what the insurance companies are actually doing. It's really given us an idea of where we are versus where we think or where we thought we were. But these surveys also brought a bunch of new questions, like what about good governance? What about the accuracy of the algorithms? And it also led to a whole host of other new questions, which I'm sure we'll all be working on, hopefully way beyond Mr. Amodei's prediction. So our goal today is to help answer some of those questions and to add to the understanding of this technology. We aim to unpack some of the challenges and the opportunities insurers and insurance regulators have and that we're seeing with the new technology, and possibly to see where this is going. So that's always the big question. So let's jump right in. So my first question is for everyone here. So AI is firmly entrenched in our industry. It will only become more prevalent as time goes on. So early discussions on this topic were focused on understanding what is and what isn't AI and understanding how it would impact all of our decisions. We now have gradually gotten to get more of an idea of now where and what it can do and how we can harness it. In your view, what is your comfort level with AI? So Petra?
Yes, thank you, Barbara, and hi again, everyone. So what is my view? Yeah, well, it got some bumps along the way, but I thought over Christmas when I dedicated a day to ChatGPT and some AI training at home online that I was really in my comfort zone. I was doing well until I realized that my 19-year-old and my 14-year-old were looking with me over my shoulder and then said, "Oh, Mom, you're trying AI? That's adorable." I think I'm still a bit behind, in all honesty, but I'm trying to get there. So that's personal. On the IOPA level, I think we're trying to do the same, and we do that, as you said, also through surveys. So we've done the Big Data Analytics survey in 2019. We followed up last year, again, with surveying what is the use, what are they using, in which part of the business are they using it. Except for generative AI, I think we got a pretty good picture. We're doing a recap this year, but then only for generative AI. But I think you never can be really comfortable, as the example shows, because there's always those who are faster, and that I think is inevitably what happens with this technology. So monitoring jointly and understanding what is happening, or at least where it is today, knowing it will move tomorrow is important.
Yeah, thank you. I think that sounds great. So Anthony, how about you? You've heard now from the regulator side. How does that affect your business?
Yeah, GPT sort of brought AI to the kitchen table, right? Like my parents are talking about it and doing things, and I think that that's really exciting, but it also created almost a disproportionate hype cycle about AI. And now we have agentic AI, which is sort of replacing some of the discussion about Gen AI and large language models. And on the one hand, that's amazing because I am a non-technical founder of a company, sort of been a business leader my whole career. There are questions I've always had that sometimes have to go into an IT ticket, and somebody needs to build me a solution for me to get some hypotheses or questions answered. Now I can poke around a little bit more, and that's really exciting. But one of the things that I think is now happening is some companies are really excited about AI, and that's great, but we're also running around with a hammer looking for a nail in a lot of places. And I think right now in this moment, I feel like there are great opportunities for AI, and I'm as excited as anybody. But one of the things that we're starting to see, through a lot of customers is a bit of a course correction that AI is maybe helping to identify a lot of opportunities, but it's then helping a technologist to say, oh, that's a problem you want me to solve? I can actually solve that another way. And I think that that's great because we're identifying new challenges and new opportunities with this technology, but as it's maturing and being normalized, we're actually helping technologists to say, oh, I didn't even think about that problem, let me solve this another way, and I think that's great.
And I think similar to what everyone has said, we've been using AI in the broadest definition for a decade in the insurance industry, right? And I think people really understand that approach in a lot of context. Gen AI is new, and maybe people have been using it for the last couple of years. And the change cycle of that is moving so quickly that the biggest piece that I think people have a little discomfort with is how fast new things happen. Mm-hmm. And so keeping up with that and having the right systems in place, the right way to evaluate problems, the right things to do in terms of training your people and having them learn a new technology in your companies, I think is really important to increasing the comfort level with it.
I can appreciate that from the company side. That makes perfect sense. And I would ask, have you guys actually seen where not just getting comfort level with it, but being able to use it for new purposes that you hadn't thought of before, sort of stretching your wings, testing things out? Have you started doing any of those things with Zurich?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at broader day-to-day life, you gave examples, everybody did, of how they're using it, and it's pretty common in marketing and sales, retail, that there's an AI engine powering a lot of those solutions. And that is also coming more and more into the insurance space and underwriting and claims. But I think there's a real potential for the AI to shift insurance from detect and repair to predict and prevent. And so when you go out and you have a construction site and you have cameras and you have an AI tool supporting that, that could identify unsafe behaviors and trigger training from your on-site supervisors really quickly and actually prevent an accident from ever happening, which is a great way to approach risk management and is a service we could work with our customers to actually provide. So I think things like that are real opportunities to change the way that we help our customers solve their risk management needs and actually kind of improve everybody's experience.
It doesn't sound like you're replacing very many people to do that.
I do think, obviously, this is transformational technology, right? It's transformational. But I also think back to, there are people in the workforce today that didn't start with computers on their desk, right? They're still in the workforce today. Is their job different? Did they have to learn new skills? Absolutely. They had to adapt and learn. And so I do think a lot of these, basic jobs will be replaced. But it doesn't mean to me that people will have no jobs. They'll just have jobs that value decision-making and personal relationships more than their ability to type things in quickly. And I think that's not a bad thing, really, overall.
Thank you. So I just want to remind everybody that everybody's bio up here is on the website, and so please check it out. But I wanted to make sure that Anthony got a chance to talk about his company because it's a little different, and it's part of the value proposition. So Anthony, could you tell us a little bit about Monitaur?
One of these things is not like the other.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so it's a privilege to be here and to be invited by the NAIC. In 2019, founded this company. It's called Monitaur. And this is not where I thought I would be in this moment in time. But the reason the company was started is I do fundamentally think AI can make our life better. I'm actually, in 2017 and 2018, became hugely inspired by the applications of AI in healthcare and cancer research and drug discovery. I think healthcare has huge inequities and opportunities to be bettered, and I think technology can do that. And so I became really curious. I'm a generally pretty curious person, operate my life in a pretty Socratic way, ask lots of questions. And so I started asking, what would limit AI from having that positive impact? Like, what's going to be the friction from AI helping healthcare? And so I left a job and just started exploring that question. And honestly, the most boring, unsexy thing ever became obvious. Governance and audit. Oh, yeah, great, really amazing. But I sort of imagine there's no way we're going to use AI in really consequential situations if we can't trust it. And you know what drives trust? Auditability in governance, these really boring words. And in 2018, for those of you that remember, black box is what everybody said. AI is a black box. It's not totally true. You can absolutely document a system, test the system, right? Put people oversight in place. These are solvable problems. So let's build a solution that does that. And fast forward to today, well, healthcare wasn't totally ready. And while I'm still inspired by that opportunity space, insurance turned out to be, in my opinion, the perfect place to point something like Monitaur. And there's a couple of reasons for that. This industry runs on models. It has for a long time. It's the only industry with literally expert modelers and actuaries. And so as you think about this industry taking on AI, which is a type of model, for the most part, it's as prepared as any to be thoughtful about building great AI systems, because we've been using complex models for a really long time. And I wrote an article for Carrier Journal a while ago called Insurance the Hero AI Needs. And in some ways, I think that this room, figuring out how to build and deploy and insure AI products, unlocks the entire AI innovation space. Like, this room knowing how to do it really well means companies will invest in AI because they feel that they're insured, taking risks with AI. And that's a sort of really exciting opportunity. And so what we've tried to do as a company is really insert ourselves in the middle of this, whether it's helping customers, carriers like Progressive or Lincoln or Unum to build and scale a governance program, or helping some of the big data platforms like Verisk to do the same thing so that they can bring trust to their customers, or spending time with the NAIC, or traveling to Oklahoma with Commissioner Mulready, right, to spend time helping to educate regulators, but also hear what they are worried about, so that as we're providing a solution, we can really bring those stakeholders together. And I've also drank the Kool-Aid now. And insurance is so important and so impactful that my mission and inspiration, I still feel really connected to that, bringing this kind of a solution to insurance.
So we're all thrilled you're drinking the Kool-Aid. That's a very important thing.
So much Kool-Aid.
So, Petra, why don't we go to some of the work that you guys have been doing? Because the NAIC and the state insurance supervisors have done survey work on the use of AI in the United States. And I know you've done your own surveys of the EU firms. Can you share some of the results and some of the key trends you're seeing? And I'd like to know whether or not we could talk about whether the EU AI Act has affected any of this.
Yeah, happy to do so. I think any process or decision that is data-driven, in the end, you could optimize that also with AI. And we're just, and this is an industry, as you say, that does that. So where are we in EU? Based on the survey we did last year, we see that, and we published it as well, but 50% of non-life and 24% of life insurers indicate they already are using AI. But in the next 3 years, an additional 30% in non-life, so that brings it up to 80 in total, and another 39, so also moving over 50% in life, is planning to use it. So then the next question is, and you'll find a very nice chart in that report, is where are they using it then in the insurance value chain? And what we see is they use it actually in many parts already. So first of all, underwriting. Insurers are using AI in innovative ways. For example, processing satellite images to assess natural catastrophe risks, and address net cat risk by using those images. They're using it in sales and distribution to inform marketing campaigns, provide also more tailored advertising, and it's also helping to identify what is their next best in action if a consumer is looking for something. But there's also several applications that directly benefit consumers, and that also stands out in our consumer protection report, where consumers indicate that they much appreciate the faster claims handling thanks to AI. So here clearly there's a benefit that we have. Now when it comes to generative AI and on large pre-trained, the pre-trained foundation models, including large language models, we don't know exactly because we send it out when Gen AI really started to happen. And that's interesting, and that's just last year. So this is how fast it goes. But we do see that is happening as well. We do the survey this year. The buzzword now being agentic AI. Fascinating, the idea that we don't even need apps in the future. You just ask your phone, and your phone finds its way and comes back with maybe a very good proposal for a policy that you should consider. I mean, how does that work? I mean, immediately my head goes like, okay, but what about all the rules that you need to follow in conduct supervision? How does that work? But this is the direction of travel, and I think we will have to deal with that. Now, in EU, indeed, there's also then the AI Act, and we need to deal with that. But do we really as insurance? And that is what I ask. And this is very important to keep in mind when we discuss the AI Act in Europe. It was introduced for the entire economy. So anyone using AI is going to be regulated for the use of AI, including the insurance industry, including EIOPA as well. We're using AI, so we will be supervised on the use of AI because it's applicable. Yet for the insurance industry, a lot of what is in the AI Act is already in Solvency II. So first of all, in the AI Act, there's rules that you have to say you're a chatbot. If you're a lawyer, you're talking to a chatbot right now. That message needs to go for low risk. Then there is forbidden risk, like using facial recognition to follow people by the state, for example. That is forbidden. But then there's a high risk category, and in this high risk category, there is life and health insurance. Now, what does that mean for life and health insurance? Well, it means they need to have robust management methods. They need to have a high quality standards for their data. They need to have strong governance, and they need to keep records. And they also need to retain human oversight, be able to explain outcomes they can't explain, and they can't discriminate. Now, any life insurer that tells me that this is totally new, that they now need to start implementing this, has me really worried because there's nothing new. I think that is what we should do anyway on the Solvency II already, and it should be there. Now, one of the challenges of the AI Act is the scope. Because the definition is very broad. But here I think we have a very good dialogue with the Commission that is realizing that some traditional statistical models and mathematical optimization models, but also linear regression models, are not AI. And should not be included in the scope. And we're making progress on the discussion because I think that is helpful, that we stick as much to the practice that we have. Finally, what does that then mean for all the other use of AI by insurers that are not in that scope? Well, there's still Solvency II. So I think for us as EIOPA, going forward, the main part is not so much the regulation that we need. I think we have it, and it was there already. But what we do need is as supervisors to deal with all kinds of examples of AI that we run into in our job, and we then somehow need to have an opinion, or do we think that is explainable enough? Is that transparent enough? And this is where we need to help each other. This is why we are publishing a guidance addressed to supervisors, how you could deal with that. And I think also in the IIS, and we work there together, Barbara, we also try at the international level to see how supervisors can just help each other by very much, I think, also just practical cases. This is what I can run into. This is how I looked at it. This is how we dealt with it. I think that should be the focus at the moment.
Yeah, and I can totally appreciate it. Obviously, we've been working on this for a while together. I would say one thing that you brought up, which I think is interesting, is the customer relationship to all of this. Because obviously, if you use claims management and you have an AI response, it can respond much faster. And One of the things that we saw in our state was a huge outcry from the consumers because they were concerned that AI was happening because they found out in 2 minutes that their claim was denied. So they didn't like that, but it turns out, I mean, it was denied for a practical purpose. They put the wrong code in. It wasn't anything bad, but their anxiety went up significantly, and all of a sudden there was a big pushback to go to the legislature to find out whether or not they could have more human in the loop. I saw that sort of transmission or that transition timing to be very interesting. So I'm going to take that actually now down to Kristen, if you could.
Yeah.
So because, the surveys indicate that the firms are using AI for advertising, claims, fraud, and some other areas. But how do you think AI has improved Zurich's core processing, such as advertising, claims, and customer service?
Insurance is a very document data heavy process, right? So there's a lot of things that are being exchanged with various parties, and AI simplifies all that for everyone. And so it brings information together, it can load it into our systems, it can do all of those things very seamlessly and free up people's time to spend more on analyzing and servicing the customers. And so I do think it will be across the whole insurance value chain. But really the investment, I think at least from a Zurich perspective, a human will be making the underwriting and claims decisions. What the AI is doing is helping them do that faster, smarter, enabling sort of their work to become more, like I said, relationship-based, or thinking-based instead of the routine, I have to type this in, I have to go find this, I have to do that. That piece is the piece that we're taking out with AI.
So how has the industry evolved over the last 5 years? I mean, because this is happening fast. So
It's happening fast. I think there's a few different ways it's evolved. One is all of the major vendors that we work with are investing heavily in this space. So not just the pure technology companies like a Microsoft or an Amazon, but also, the policy administration systems, the, customer relationship management systems, like all of those people are investing heavily in AI technology. And so if you use one of those tools, you have the ability to just adopt AI, whether or not you employ the experts that Anthony mentioned. Companies are also investing heavily. You've seen public announcements about investments in AI. So clearly, the industry feels like this is a significant transformational thing, like we all do, and we need to invest in it and learn about it. So you do see those improvements kind of running through the whole value chain. And I do think, you had some good examples of customer interactions that can be a lot better, even with the human still in the loop. If you take all the time you spend collating information, if that goes down, you get to your customers or your trading partners or those people a lot more quickly. So I think it's adding a lot of value already.
So with new technologies, they almost always, they start in the back office, they start in the operations. But have you seen any, or do you see indications of any new products that are becoming innovated?
Yeah, I think I mentioned the construction example. Petra mentioned some of the things you can do now with surveying properties remotely and understanding the risk profile of those. So you do see that. I do think, too, that the better understanding you get from all the information, you can use AI to identify coverage gaps or things like that in complex policies, particularly if you have large corporate clients that maybe have a multinational policy that's written in different languages, that's all different coverages locally. The AI brings that together so someone who speaks one language can now read all those policies and understand where they're the same and different. So that's a really highly powerful tool for them to be able to provide a better product and a more comprehensive review of what the customer is buying back. So I do think we're starting to see that across the industry.
Thank you. So Anthony, I can tell that you wanted to say something, so go ahead.
I think one of the things I'm observing as a challenge that regulators are grappling with, but also so is industry, is this idea of consumer disclosures, right? So the EU Act has transparency statements. You have a law in Colorado that talks about transparency disclosures to consumers, and we talk about human in the loop all the time. Like, that's not achievable thing forever, nor do I think human in the loop should indefinitely be a North Star, because in a lot of cases that might not be the best solution, right? Like you might be able to have an explicit rules-based system that in some jurisdictions could be considered AI, but you actually just want that system to act, to get a payment to a consumer faster and more accurately. So I think one of the I think difficult conversations that's happening right now, but it's really worth having, is in what way might disclosures actually scare consumers about AI being involved versus the benefit of that in a way that we actually are like limiting positive impacts. So if I'm simply saying like, hey, AI was used in this decision, I joke often like, we didn't say your case got assigned to a really junior underwriter and you have a less experienced person working on this case. And so I think that's a complex problem and one that sometimes just disclosing AI has been used is trivializing an opportunity, and we need to be thoughtful about how we can provide transparency about how a decision was made, but whether it was AI or a human making that decision, should that really be a singular decision point? I think there's a lot of opportunity to start looking ahead and maybe softening the expectation for human in the loop always, because that might not be the ideal outcome, and how can we help sort of a broader market get comfortable with that they might not always be in the loop, but that's okay, because there's something better that you got from this. So just a thought as I'm listening to you all talk that's been on my mind quite a bit.
I think, though, that the issue that came up about disclosures even came up in the climate panel. Nobody reads the disclosure, so if you're telling somebody something and they're not reading it, you got to figure out what kind of benefit you're actually giving everybody,
Agreed.
and what they really understand. So I totally get the love of disclosures, but
Yeah.
love to have a process that actually created a real response in the consumer. So appreciate you. Keep on thinking about that, because we are probably going to be coming back and asking you more about that. So in the meanwhile, so let's talk about good governance. So the firms themselves are considered or required to have good governance procedures over the use of AI. So Anthony, what do you think your observations are regarding the maturity and readiness of AI governance programs, and what are the general themes that you're seeing across and among your clients?
I think Petra's frankness about if you say you don't have governance, I'm worried. Like, there's an element of that rings really true. Like, there's not a single insurance company that doesn't have governance, right? Model governance around your solvency and your reserving. Like, these are understood things. And actuaries have been doing model governance for a while. Like, there's an actuarial standard of practice. At ASOP 56, it says you should be monitoring models. Okay, drift is that, right? And when we talk about it in the AI context. So on the one hand, I think that this industry is incredibly prepared for the idea of governance. I think when it comes to AI governance, there's some real growing challenges. First and foremost, who owns this, right? So within an organization, you've got something that's seen as a technology, right? And does that mean this is an IT problem to solve from an infrastructure perspective? We have to define what our governance program should be. Who's doing that? Is it the legal team? Is it the risk team? And then you have some organizations that are saying, I would like to get clarity from regulators of what they want before I build a program. And so then they don't maybe invest because it's not clear what their objective or their target should be. And so I think there's an opportunity in incremental governance that I think AI can fuel, because your boards are concerned about AI. They see that there's a lot of public discourse about the use of AI. And so for some companies, this is an opportunity to go to your board and say, I need incremental investment in fundamental model governance that can help me think about my overall architecture and maybe create more efficiencies in governance, right? I think that's one opportunity space. I think so companies are trying to get their organizational alignment done, and it's hard to operationalize something if you don't have alignment yet. But the good news is when you look at the EU AI Act, and you look at the NAIC bulletin, and you look at NIST, and you even look at the Information Commissioner Office in the UK, what you do find is, as sort of Petra alluded to, some really fundamental principles. And I think right now, companies are starting to, I think, better appreciate, okay, this isn't as much of a lift as I thought it would be, and it's more about how do I demonstrate what I am doing. And so that also requires the regulators to understand, well, what would I want to see? And that's why I think the H committee is really driving what kind of questions would we ask? Right, and I think I'd love to see this industry keep going down the path of some of these questions can come from existing processes, existing actuarial things, and I was not familiar with some of the work happening in Europe to try to clarify some historical model types versus AI. I know that's a friction point here in the U.S. is what's your definition in scope. So whether we do create a separation between traditional pricing and underwriting or other things, or GLM versus GBM and LLM, what I hope we don't lose is fundamental betterment of just model governance. And like Helena made a comment yesterday about stress testing, that stress testing is getting hard because we're seeing so many scenarios we haven't seen before. Whether it's AI or it's an actuarial model or a CAT model with a bunch of historical data as the influence for that, I actually think our worries about AI making up its own things are causing us to think more comprehensively about model testing. And that's really good for the industry, and I hope that we don't lose that. I'm seeing that in a lot of clients. They're looking at historical models differently because of the questions that AI is forcing. And I think that's all great.
So making up things, we're allowed to call hallucinations. It's all right.
Yeah. Well, you know what's actually, even hallucinations, what's funny about that is like, while those are a concern, generative systems are not truthful. Like fundamentally, they're not truthful applications. So sometimes we try and deploy a large language model or a generative model into an application that requires facts, and it's not a factual system. So it's sort of like, okay, yes, things can hallucinate, but also what's the purpose here? If you're worried about, if hallucinations are unacceptable, then don't use that, right? Like don't try to mitigate a hallucination, just don't use it.
All right, now that you've scared us, Christian.
Yeah.
So compliance is key for AI users, and although some of the principles are generally the same across jurisdictions, there are some differences, as you know. So how is Zurich navigating the AI compliance, and how are you streamlining your processes? And would really like to know if there's any regulatory barriers that are preventing more robust use of AI. And are you engaging your employees? I know this is a long question, but in the understanding AI and its use benefits.
Yeah, I think, as Anthony just mentioned, all companies have a governance policy already. We're a regulated industry, and we also have an ethical responsibility to our customers, given all the data that we have that we use that appropriately, we protect the privacy of it, and that fairness is important. And so, at Zurich, we've made a public data commitment on how we'll treat that. That transparency with our customers is important. We have an AI assurance framework that helps us make sure that our practitioners and the folks who are deploying models are actually doing that in a way that is consistent with all of our policies. So I think in the context of the regulators, this is a changing space, so we're all kind of feeling our way through it, and that's true on the regulation side too. So part of it is we have to try to keep up with it. I think where we have things that we'd like to see from the regulatory community is maybe a couple considerations. One is not all insurance is created exactly the same. So when we see regulation that comes out that is just a peanut butter high-level approach and it covers life and health and personal lines and large corporate, that can be very hard for us to navigate in because it's hard to even define, like, what does bias mean in a large multinational corporation versus a person, right? That feels very different, and the way people think about it is very different. And the way, if you ask the regulators, they'll give you a personal lines example. So I think thinking about that and having some, real thought around what are we trying to do as an outcome of this regulation, and really what are we trying to see across the board of different types would be really important. The other piece, I think, as a practitioner in this space, when it's very prescribed how you have to do the modeling or how you have to show bias, that to us is a barrier because we're trying to think about how to solve a problem. You have experts in this space. What we'd like the regulators to focus on is what are the outcomes you want, and let's measure against those outcomes, but let the experts figure out how we do that. So bring you the solutions, let us demonstrate that what we did meets your desired outcomes, but don't tell us exactly how we do it, because I think that can actually lead to worse outcomes in the end for us, because it won't be as specific to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I would say, I think that the reason why the regulators are using that high level is we're trying not to end up in a spot
Right.
where we're forcing people to do things specifically. So
Right.
I really appreciate where you're coming from on that one. So Petra, so we know that AI is not just for the industry, but it's used for regulators as well. So what's AOPA doing to explore the use of AI in soup tech? And how do you ensure that third-party providers that regulators are using are keeping up with the standards that we regulators are putting forward to the insurers?
Yeah, great questions. Let me start with that one. But maybe also let me share a thought that was triggered by what Anthony said. It's also the question that the supervisor asks. And the use of AI is also about the prompt, the question you ask the AI. I think one of the beauties of this new technology is that if you want to be good in something that will really be part of our future, you need to be able to ask questions. In a time that we don't always ask questions, but we say what we want to say. I think that is maybe the beauty, that you have to train yourself in asking the right question also as a regulator. So I'll note that. That's my takeaway already there, Anthony. So so what are we doing at IOPA? So we have SubTech work that is ongoing, and we also had a SubTech and data seminar where we work with other regulators on supervisory tools. And what we found is that actually there is in general still a bit of hesitancy on the use of generative AI among the supervisory community. In all fairness, it has to do with privacy, it has to do with data security. We do have the GDPR. It's not good if you don't comply with GDPR, but it is something that is complicating the use of AI. How does that work? IT infrastructure readiness, very important. Actually, one of my questions is IT infrastructure readiness. If we use AI to find information for us in the old systems, you have found a workaround the old systems, but does that also then make you not think about maybe to replace the old systems? And so I think what incentive is there to really uplift your system, so to really be ready for all the technology that's still coming? It's one of the questions that we have, but also the reliability, specifically because they're not trained on supervisory data. So I think these are things, but we are seeing progress. Supervisors are using large language model assistants. They're also having certain APIs, and definitely for anti-money laundering, we already see the use of AI also in the supervisor to look at that. And I think what we agreed on in that session was that there's a few things that a SubTech tool should have, which is good data management and a quality process, not surprising, good cooperation between the teams. So that can't be your or his problem. You need to have supervisors, the IT team working together. SubTech tools must also fit in the overall supervisory framework so that we know where it is positioned in what we do. And in the end, it needs to balance a top-down approach, and this is what we want, with the expectations that we have of technology that can or cannot be delivered. So let's see how that works going forward. We have adopted a SubTech strategy. We are working further, and a project that we now have on the way is that we are screen scraping the information of the PRIPS kits that we have, so the information documents to consumers, and we try to get that into a database that should then lead to a comparison, and where we can also find the outliers or the good products or the bad products. We've just established 2 weeks ago that this will only lead to a minimum viable product. So here, I think what we hoped that we would have, the perfect tool, we're not that there, but it's also not that we don't have anything. We make progress. So I think it is also an iterative process, but it starts with an idea about saying, let's try this one out, and then sharing with each other how we can do that better forward. Dealing with unstructured data will be definitely something that is now a challenge, but could also become easier when we develop these new technologies. And I think here the European single access point, which is now under development, which should be one point through a website where anyone can access all financial data that is published by entities, and we're building this. I think this is this, and here we will also try to have a more structured approach to that data. That should really help in the future to set a base for those who want to use technology but need the data to find it easily by going through this website. So that's future, but I think in the end it will more and more become a tool that we can use. And in EIOPA, as I said, we now since January have a tool that we can use. It took a while because also through the Commission we really considered the confidentiality of supervisory data. How do we deal with that? But we now have a system where we call it Commission GPT, but you can open in an open setting or in a closed setting. In a closed setting, we can use supervisory data. What we still need to work on is if you then close your computer, everything is gone because it's really not recorded. But so you need to be aware of that. But it is helpful. So whether it's the outline of a speech or a notes or of a meeting to translate it into minutes or an appreciation of a paper or summaries, we can now do that. And so I'm getting briefings from my staff that say this document was also supported by the use of AI, and I welcome that. So I think by doing that, by slowly as an organization working with it together with our colleagues, is also a way that when we then talk to insurers that use it, we're more comfortable. Then to the big question about the third-party providers and the growing reliance we see on those tools and what we do with that. Now, here the AI Act does help. It has taken a horizontal and a cross-sectoral approach. So it looks at the entire industry in EU, and it actually has established some responsibilities with various actors who are involved in the development and in the deployment and in the use of AI systems. And the focus is a shared responsibility framework, and it aims at ensuring that stakeholders are aware of their roles and obligations, and ultimately that they promote a responsibility, but also a responsible development when you use AI in EU. And so, as an example, the AI Act requires developers of an AI tool, so that's third parties, or also insurers that develop themselves in-house, to provide detailed instructions and information about the capabilities of their tools to the deployers. So in this way, we hope that we facilitate to a certain extent the ability of those who use a third-party model to actually be able to still have the responsibility, because insurers remain responsible if they use that tool, but to also explain that then to the outside world. In the same way, I think it comes also with just common sense. And here I go back to the tool we use internally. It came with some rules. And the rules are really nice. The first rule is that if you use it, be sure data quality is in order. Then if you use it, make sure copyrights and property rights are considered, and then that you take that on board. Rule 3 is you cannot copy-paste what you get out of the tool into an official EIOPA document. You can use the information, but you still draft your own document. And then the final one is you cannot use the tool when you are in a hurry. And I found that brilliant. I found that do not use this when you're in a rush. Why? You probably skip all the steps that we just outlined. So I appreciate that these will also have to develop further. I mean, we need to see how that works in the future. But I think it is also common sense with anything we do. What am I doing? And I appreciate that technology can do everything, also without a human in the loop. But the question is, do we want to use that in our industry, given the responsibility our industry has for many consumers that count on us when they really need it in life?
No, and I appreciate where you're coming from as a regulator. I think that one of the things that I want to highlight is that, you're allowed to make mistakes too.
Yeah.
You just and if you protect it and you don't download it and you don't let it out, that makes a big difference. And I think that as regulators, we're always trying to figure out how to also work with counterparts in the industry to try to say, we're trying this, are you trying this, and to sort of grow together so that we understand the bounds of what they're trying and how we would then look at it and have those kind of open dialogues. So I think those are always really important, and I appreciate you bringing that forward. So Anthony, so let's talk about the clients that you have as far as building and managing AI governance programs that address standards and regulations, so that you do this in both the US and in Europe. So how are you observing your clients' management to the similarities and differences of the different AI services across geographies?
Maybe the easiest answer to give today is the companies investing in things like Monitaur are not really doing it fueled by regulatory compliance motivations. It's fundamental innovation enablement, right? So as you think about, like Gartner put a data point out there that only 1 out of 26 AI projects even make it to production. There's a lot of ideation happening and a lot of like playing around, but it's not actually making it into production. There's a tremendous cost in that for companies. If you have everybody running around trying things, like what's getting done, and are we diverting those resources away from something else? And so, I think our customers would generally say they're investing in incremental governance, better inventory, documentation, testing, because it's helping to drive alignment. We now know what our people are working on. We're better prioritizing which ideas make the most sense, and then we're more prepared to take those good ideas into production because we have a structure and a system for that. So they can innovate faster. And so those companies that are trying to take leadership positions and maintain moats, they believe in the opportunity of AI and they see governance as an enabler. And I think the good news is there's an approach to governance which absolutely ladders up into many of the regulations and standards. Yeah. And so where some might view governance as it's a reaction to compliance, and I need to establish governance, it reacts to compliance, I think there are plenty of other companies that are starting to really view governance as a business enabler. And now, along with that, though, one opportunity that I think is maybe missing in the conversation about AI regulation is, in the dynamic of there's a stick and there's a carrot, right? 2 incentive structures. I think right now a lot of AI regulation is very stick-oriented. If you don't do this, right, during an exam or a market conduct, something might happen. But I think there's a carrot opportunity with companies that demonstrate great governance. And what I mean by that is if we're going to ask companies to show more great governance, model governance, AI governance, how could that maybe start to remove some friction in other model-related exam and review experiences? So, everyone knows that there's a tremendous amount of work that's involved in a model filing. Well, what if you are an organization that can attest to and be audited for your great governance programs? Can that create certain flexibility in dynamic pricing and bringing new products and services to market? I'm not an insurance expert, but as I mentioned, I'm very curious and I like to ask questions, and that to me is a really interesting question that would have value for sort of both sides of the table, right? Innovation could maybe move faster with a certain degree of trust, but then also regulators who are resource constrained and maybe struggle to do the frequency and volume and depth of reviews, they can move into more of like a sampling and distributed approach. So that's just one opportunity I think that exists with companies who are going to invest in great governance. Is there some carrot that can come from making those investments when maybe other companies are not?
Yeah. And I think we all appreciate carrots more than sticks, definitely. So unfortunately, we're running out of time. So we were going to try to talk a little bit about agentic AI, but I wanted to bring up a couple of the Slido questions as part of our last question, because I think the Dario Amodei quote may have scared people because they're talking about less entry-level jobs in the industry. How are we going to grow the next generation of leaders? I mean, it's like those are all those deep breath questions, but maybe what I really need to do is ask you all, what predictions do you have for AI in the next 6 months, 2 years, 10 years? Let's start with Kristen.
Yeah, I think maybe speaking a little bit directly to the questions, the entry-level jobs of 20 years ago aren't the same as the entry-level jobs of today, and those of today will not be the same as those of tomorrow, right? And I think, the exciting thing about people, coming up into the industry is that they know this stuff better than the people in the industry now. Like, they are just so much more fluent in technology. They've been using this, maybe appropriately or not appropriately, back to your governance comments, in their school. But they're very familiar with it and comfortable with it. So I think we will have to kind of redefine what the entry-level work is of tomorrow. We will have to set up appropriate training, and we will have to leverage these people who are so fluent in new things to teach our current employees that fluency, right? So that intergenerational training. On a positive side, you could say we've been talking for years and years and years about the demographic shift and the need for just more people entering the industry. AI might actually help close that gap, right? And actually say that, with the people who we actually have in the population, which is less than we used to have, we can now provide these great services in a way we never could have done if this hadn't happened from a technological innovation. So I won't try to say what'll happen 10 years from now, because I don't know what'll happen, honestly, next year, the way this is moving. I mean, it's just so fast. The things we thought were really innovative are commoditized already. But I do think we really have to focus on the people part of AI and getting our employees, getting our people ready to just embrace this change and helping them through it and teaching them how to leverage this new technology in a way that'll really support their own career ambitions and support those of our customers.
So we're out of time, so
I'm
if you
sorry.
guys want to go, I'll give you 60 seconds.
I guess I'll just build on that really quickly in that when I made the comment about we don't always need human in the loop, I think that insurance is so personal. Like, let's talk about agents and brokers for a minute, right? If we can remove a lot of back office and transactional work, then that creates more moments where I can sit at coffee with Petra and talk about her plan and talk about her personal needs in a human way. And that is a tremendous opportunity. We don't get to do that as much because there's so much other work that needs to be done. So I think actually, like, in terms of moving our time and attention and effort, a lot of the people we have doing that have great institutional knowledge about insurance right now are stuck doing very procedural things. If that procedural work can be replaced with some degrees of automation, we can actually bring that expertise directly into these more human moments and human interactions. And as a consumer, overwhelmed by what my insurance means, like, I want to pick up the phone, I want to have coffee with my local agent, even for my business insurance, to talk about these things. And I actually think AI can enable that, and that is a great opportunity for the industry.
Petra, you want to close us out?
I'll close it out. Yeah, I really hope it helps us to reach more consumers, and that consumers really benefit from what they get. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that. I hope we can do that in a way that supervisors are still comfortable, maybe a bit on the edge, but still okay with what is happening. And I do hope, and that's a lot, that in the groups, like our group in the IAS, not only this year, but in the years to come, we continue with, I think, a really good dialogue, not per se about more regulation, but about how to supervise it, how to deal with it, how to be comfortable, and actually, trying to keep pace with the speed this technology is developing as supervisors.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate being able to spend some time with you talking about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.